Welcome to Resilience Development in Action, where strength meets strategy and courage to help you move forward. Each week, your host, Steve Bisson, a therapist with over 2 decades of experience in the first responder community, brings you powerful conversations about resilience, growth, and healing through trauma and grief. Through authentic interviews, expert discussions, and real-world experiences, we dive deep into the heart of human resilience. We explore crucial topics like trauma recovery, grief processing, stress management, and emotional well-being. This is Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson.
Hi, and welcome to episode 217. This is the conclusion of episode 216 with Ashley and Dustin Wright. You heard the bio in the last one. Quickly, though, he's a police officer. She's a counselor. Both have strong ties to church and their faith in Christ. And let's continue the interview. GetFree.ai. You heard me talk about it. I'm going to keep on talking about it because I love it. I've had about a year and a half, 18 months practice with it, and I still enjoy it. And it saves me time and it saves me energy. Free.ai takes your note, makes a what you're talking with a client, just press record. And it does either transcript, it does a subjective and an objective with a letter if needed for your client and for whoever might need it. So for $99 a month, it saves me so much time that it's worthwhile. And if you do it for a whole year, guess what? You get 10% off. More importantly, this is what you got to remember because you are my audience that listens to Resilience Development in Action. If you do listen to this and you want to use free.ai, put in the code Steve50 in the promo code area, Steve50, and you will get $50 off in addition to everything we just talked about. Get freed from writing your notes. Get freed from even writing your transcripts. Use that to your advantage. Free.ai, a great service. Go to getfree.ai and you will get one of the best services that will save you time and money. And I highly encourage you to do so.
Yeah, resiliency, and I'll speak from law enforcement, is super important because we're going to have troubles, we're going to have struggles, and we need to bounce back pretty quickly in what we do. If me and Ashley are having a serious, terrible disagreement, and I take that into work, well, that now affects my decision making on these life and death calls. And, if I don't have the resiliency to be able to overcome that, that can be life-changing. And I think that's important when we talk about what resiliency is. It's that ability to handle that and bounce back. And so that's what I would talk. Same with our marriage, right? We're going to have difficulties. We're going to have tough times. What does it look like when we have that? How quickly do we bounce back and everything?
Yeah. And sometimes it's easy to bounce back. Sometimes it's, a small hurt. But I think the reality is we see it in therapy all the time. Things can build. And so that goes back to, you need to get in the habit in your marriage of talking about things and being vulnerable and, prioritizing, kind of some foundational things to your relationship and being intentional about that so that you can show up and when the harder things hit, or if there's something that, you can't resolve right away, you just feel a little bit more resilient and prepared. Yeah.
I want to add, and we talked about it from the beginning, is the preparation part. You cannot expect to have something bad happen and not do any preparation beforehand and be okay. It's the same thing with law enforcement training. I can't expect to go out there and hit shoot 100% if I'm not even doing that in training. So what are we doing now before that happens? If you have nothing prepared, you should be meeting with a therapist, meeting with a group. Hey guys, I want to put some things in place in case this does happen.
Yeah. I think the other part that you didn't say those exact words, but I think that sometimes what I find when my law enforcement couples, you said something to the effect of, and this is me paraphrasing, growing is together.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is so important is I see too many people oh, my wife or my husband or my partner or whatever politically correct word we got to use this week. I'm not much of a politically correct guy, but oh, they're doing this. I'm like, that's their growth. Get into the growth with them. They're not running away from you. They're just growing. And I
Mhm.
think that sometimes I see that particularly in first responders. I'm not trying to shit on anyone, but that's true. They see that as a threat. It's not a
Mhm.
threat. It's a good thing. But too many people see it as a threat. And I don't know if that's you've seen that, but I've certainly, someone turns to XYZ therapy or God or whatever. And then they're
Mhm.
like, well, they're leaving me behind. No, no one's leaving you behind. You're choosing that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've seen that, but that's just wanted to throw that out too.
Yeah, definitely seen some of that. And something Dustin and I were just talking about the other day is, what does it look like to, speak highly about your partner? What does it look like when they're not in the room, how are you serving them in that way? How are you talking about them? How are you praying for them? How are you kind of being their biggest cheerleader in a way? And, that can be really hard sometimes in your marriage, but it really tears apart the resiliency, the strength of your marriage when you're not investing and studying and cheering each other on in that way. So if one partner is growing a little bit more than the other, that should, like you said, that shouldn't be a bad thing. It's a great thing. And everybody grows at different levels and at different times and in different ways. But how do we partner in that rather than feeling insecure or putting the other person down? Yeah.
And
I
Great.
think
again,
that's
go
Yeah.
ahead, Dustin.
I think that's tough in the law enforcement world because we go to these calls sometimes, and you go to three domestics in a night, and one party's cheated on the other in each one, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's if it's happening here, it's happening home, and we tend to like go down these rabbit holes sometimes too. And I've been in the rooms where you're like sit there and you're like, are you really talking about your spouse that way? Like
Right.
so it's just what can we be doing better to, like we talked about earlier, serve our spouse, to get closer, to partner with them while they do want to grow, right? Like, hey, I want to come along on your journey.
Yeah. That's something we've been talking a lot this week about these topics, and something that also came up was just grace. Dustin brought up a great example just now. Responders are coming home, and while they're used to the job, they know what they're doing, and they're, this is their line of work, so it's not rocking the boat per se every night for them when they're on these calls or days or whatnot. But the reality is they're taking in a lot. And as a spouse, something that I'm always encouraging spouses is extend grace, because there are a lot of people in this world that could not do what these men and women are doing. And we do not realize the amount of images, sounds, smells, things that they're taking in on a regular basis all the time. And so while they are so gifted at it and it's a calling and they're doing what they need to do as a spouse, it is important for us to extend grace sometimes and realize that they're bringing home a lot. And so that decompression time and all these other tools that we're talking about is really important for them. And it doesn't mean it doesn't go the other way. Obviously, spouses need it too. Kids need grace, wives, husbands need grace. But it does kind of help us zoom out, if you will, and think about the bigger picture of what the responder is actually doing on a day-to-day basis. And it's pretty incredible.
That's the other part too that I think people don't understand, and they need to share with their spouse that they're seeing the 5% that the 95% of the population doesn't know about.
Yes.
That's how I describe it, is at five, you get the point, right? And when you see that, you start looking at your own life and you get a little paranoid, you get a little whatever. And that's
Mhm.
not abnormal. It's acknowledging it, but also recognizing it as paranoia, recognizing as working
Mhm.
on the couple, working on yourself, working on whatever. Because, again, if I'm breaking a wall here, you can kick my butt later on, Dustin. But I also
Mhm.
see in law enforcement who are not faithful to their partners. And that sometimes happens too. And that
Hmm.
also messes with your head. So if I'm breaking a
Mhm.
wall here, you can kick my butt. But believe me, I think it's fairly well known.
You're 100% accurate. I think we looked up data the other day. Law enforcement divorces are like 60 to 70%.
Mhm.
75%. It was astronomical and well above the national average.
Yeah.
And firefighters are up there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's the hardest part is when you talk about resilience, the vulnerability, being able to say something that's hard. I think
Mhm.
that what people tend to do is they don't, and again, you're the therapist, so I'm going to turn to you, although I am one too. But I think that sometimes I feel like it's easier to say, gee, Ashley, you did this wrong versus, you know what? I'm having a hard time.
Mhm.
And I think that
Mhm.
that's what I tell people is that you just got to change the language,
Mhm.
because your wife, your husband, partner, not pissing you off on purpose.
Mhm.
They're trying to be supportive. They just don't know how. And for me, like, I had to explain that to so many people, because even in
Mhm.
my own life, you really want to annoy me? Ask me 20 questions about anything. Then I'm out of there. I'm out. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to listen to you. I'm going to answer yes, no. And okay, you done? All right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really being able to have those conversations. And they're not trying to be annoying. Recognize what you're doing and what you're going through. But I don't know. I look to both of you for that question, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think it's, trying to remember during that emotional time where their heart's at.
Mm.
Like, are they trying to better me, or are they just trying to break me down? And I think most spouses are trying to better me. Now, it's how I receive it, right? That radical candor,
Right.
But yeah, I think that's important, is where their heart's at when they're saying it. I'm probably am being disrespectful, or maybe that's not the right word, but blunt sometimes when it's not needed, and just because I struggled with it at work and it came home with me that day or whatever. So I'll let you chime in more on that, but
It makes me laugh because this is a part of our marriage that is ongoing, and it's something we constantly talk about and work on. Again, we don't have it all together, but Dustin is more blunt and I am more sensitive. I mean, we could not be more opposite. And you've probably heard the saying before, opposites attract and then they attack. And we are that kind of couple
Yeah.
where we have learned, like, when things get hard, it's easy for us to attack each other. We can both get pretty vocal or whatnot. So we've had to learn how to slow that down. And I love what you said, Steve, about just the language, and something we learned in a marriage class that we did through our church, actually. It was called Re-engage. And they taught us how to stay in your circle. And so when you're communicating or, sharing things with your partner, what does it look like? Almost like you have an invisible hula hoop around you. How do you communicate in a way that's not, pointing a finger, or you did this or you did that, or you're the reason this happened, or da 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 da, but more of a mature, I would say, response of, hey, I'm feeling hurt, or I'm feeling disconnected, or I'm feeling lonely. I think I need time with you, or I think I need some space. I feel I need, and learning to paraphrase that and practice that often, because in the moment, like Dustin said, emotions can be high and we're very quick to hurt each other. And why would we want to do that? This is the most important relationship on earth that we have, and it's worth the investment, and it's worth not giving up. And I think part of this too is just recognizing forgiveness, that we are going to mess up, and that it's really healthy and helpful sometimes to pause and say, hey, I'm sorry, that came out wrong, will you forgive me? Something as simple as that goes a really long way. Mhm.
There's three things that you said that made perfect sense to me. Look at the intention. There's days where, like, again, I'm trying to be very respectful of spiritual life, but I'm fucked up today. And it's
Mhm.
not to mean anyone did that to me. That's just how I speak. But some people are like, whoa. And I'm like, no, it's just how I feel. I didn't attack anyone.
Mhm.
And I've had those conversations. I'm more of a blunt guy, as you probably figured out too. So, and you in the same boat. But you talked about you're both the one thing that I really like. Maybe it's the bald head that does that. I don't know. Um, but you can go to YouTube for those who are just on the podcast. Go YouTube, you'll see what I mean. But the one thing this is always the hardest conversation in couples counseling. Make sure that your safe partner does not become your dumping ground.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, I think that that's the other part too, is like, oh, she's safe. She's not going anywhere. Let me be blunt. And I'm not saying you purposely do this. I'm just saying, for example, or he's
Mhm.
my safe place. Let me throw shit at him. And
Mhm.
that's not healthy. They might be the safe person. That doesn't mean they deserve to be the dumping ground for everything else.
Mhm.
And I think that when you talk about effective strategies for couples, particularly in the first responder world, that's important to realize. Safe doesn't mean dumping.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a difference between sharing your feelings and then just, like you said, dumping on them, right?
Mhm.
Like, I can share, hey, Ashley, this happened to me today. Here's how I felt, where I get it out still. And then I come home with just the anger and I portray that on her, right? There's a
Mhm.
big difference there. And I think that's important
Mhm.
with them.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why the strategy that I discuss is if someone's delivered the message the same way you said it, how would you receive it?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if someone reacts strongly, I'm like, why do you think they responded that way? Well, you call them names without knowing what the hell went wrong or what have you. And I mean, I don't have a particular example here, but the point is saying safe is not dumping. And that's so important to me when I talk about couples counseling. And I don't do a whole lot of that anymore. I find that very difficult. Usually people don't reach out. I find it interesting. I tell people like the people who are faith-based are actually the ones who have actually healthier couples counseling than those who come when everything has hit the fan. And they're like, I need help and be fixed. I'm sorry, my wand's upstairs again. I forgot to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, that is such a good point. And I think there's a lot of statistics around that faith piece, that, community, there are certain things that are so foundational to your success. I'm always a proponent of premarital counseling. I tell couples that are thinking about marriage all the time, hey, your chances of, or the risk of conflict reduces drastically when you do premarital work, because you're talking, you're opening up, you're kind of working through things. And so I think it's, definitely important, and it goes a long way.
And I always encourage that for people who are, divorced. I say that, did you go to counseling before, you went and got married? Maybe it's time to go to counseling, just get all that stuff out so that's on the table. And then worst case scenario, in 6 months, if you need a refresher, hey, they're available. They know who you are. They know what's presenting.
Absolutely.
And with first responders in particular, because I think that the other part too, and again, Dustin, you correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that there's been so much change in the law enforcement field in the last, specifically in the last 5 years, but I would argue like 10 to 15 years, especially with body cams and stuff like that, that changes so fast. Sometimes you don't even know where your head's at.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. Just like you said, the last 5 years, there's been traumatic changes with how we do things, how we're portrayed. Like I'd imagine there's a lot of officers that are having depression or anxiety just because of social media and watching these videos. Like the most recent one, I look at it and I'm like, there's still a lot that we don't know here, but I can already tell you this scene didn't just start with 3 or 4 officers already on scene.
Correct.
And, but we don't get to say that side, right? And I know I shouldn't do it, but I'll glance at some of the comments and it upsets me. So yeah, policing in the last 5 years with social media, body cam, some of the major incidents that have happened have really changed policing drastically.
Yeah. And I would say from like a spousal place too, there's a lot of sadness around that, and I know a lot of spouses can, or people in the field can acknowledge this too. When Dustin first started out in law enforcement, there was so much energy, excitement, that there was so much newness, and we were just so naive to, what was to come. Nobody sat us down and say, hey, you know, this is what you can expect. This is what he's going to go through. This is what you're going to go through as a spouse. And so that's what prompts us to do these podcasts and open our practice and have these conversations, because we know firsthand how hard it is. And we've watched a lot of our friends get a divorce or go through things and not recover. And there's been several incidents at our own PD and in our community where it totally wrecked some families, and that's devastating. And they just, not their fault. It's just being in this line of work, and life happens and it's hard to recover. So that's what prompts us to talk about it.
I think that the other example I use regularly on this podcast and in general is everyone I know, but I've worked in different departments. 95% of the guys I've worked with in different departments, they want to go work, try to do the community safe, do everything right, and then go home. That's all they want to do. There's nothing else they want to do. There's a 5% that are assholes. And the same thing for therapists. There's 95% of therapists that you just want to help, do their best, and they want to go home. Then there's 5% that are assholes. I said the difference is I know a lot of asshole therapists, and it didn't even make the bottom page of any website. But as soon as a cop in Ohio, just picking on Ohio, sorry, Ohio, does something wrong, then the cops in North Carolina, Massachusetts, and Washington are all scumbags.
Yep.
And that's a pressure that no one can possibly comprehend.
Right.
I comprehend it somewhat from working on a regular basis, but I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
because that's what I think happens. And then if you don't have that resiliency, you don't have that vulnerability, you don't have those conversations, everything we talked about,
Yeah.
then that's what destroys couples.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's a lot against you when you are in the first responder world, unfortunately, and especially in law enforcement. I would say it's a little bit harder, or a lot bit harder. So yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
mean, I've seen it too many times. You
mhm,
talked about what you just saw on social media. Something happened in Massachusetts, where I'm based out of,
mhm,
and people are like, how is that? That's terrible. I'm like, what's the backstory? Everyone who said to me it's terrible, so what's the backstory? Well, I don't know that. Oh, so you're just taking what you're seeing and making the police the bad guy. How
Mhm.
about you
mhm.
get the whole story and then tell me what you think? And then
Yeah,
most people don't come back and ever talk to me again. Either they're embarrassed or they think I'm crazy or whatever. I don't really care. But there's
yeah,
a backstory, and never, ever forget that.
Mhm.
yes,
There's a
absolutely.
particular guy that I don't want to mention in Minnesota who did something absolutely terrible. And every law
Mhm.
enforcement person I know is absolutely behind that. It was terrible what he did for
Mhm.
5 minutes. The rest of them, like, sometimes you got to know the backstory in order to comprehend what occurred.
Mhm.
And that's the
Absolutely.
other part.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true. We're so quick to label and so quick to judge, and we don't, at the end of the day, we don't know the whole story most of the time. So,
And
yeah.
so, I know that we're coming on a time now. We've already almost
Mhm.
done an hour already.
Mhm.
Great conversation. Really appreciate both of you. Is there a way for people to, like, either reach out to you or get to you or anything else?
Yeah, so my practice is called Valor Counseling Center. We're in Holly Springs, North Carolina, and little town outside of Raleigh, but we serve most of North Carolina, and we have a lot of partners just throughout the country. It's kind of the cool thing about the responder world. You have brothers and sisters all over, and so it's a really great community and opportunity. But they can go to our website, and it's just www.valorcounselingcenter.com, all one word. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I obviously I'm a police officer primarily, but I also own a business on the side called Right Training and Consulting. You can reach out to me there. I primarily do like church safety, active shooter kind of drills, training and stuff like that, but I do that on the side. You can reach me there. And then something, we're not going to reveal too much, but we do have a nonprofit we're starting specifically for first responders and things that we've seen. So, quick little backstory. A few years ago, we had an officer in our area that was shot and killed in the line of duty. One of my good friends was involved with that situation. He was at the scene. He had to go find the bad guys that had done it. And then finally, the day of the funeral, they arrested the bad guys, I think a day or two before the funeral. Had to go through all that. And then I talked to him that night or the next night. And I was like, hey, man, how are you doing? He's like, well, everyone else has kind of put this behind them because they've already had time to process it, and I haven't. And me and my wife separately thought, well, what could we do to take that person, them and their spouse away for a couple days and work through that in a safe environment with mental health, with all this downtime, and provide it for them free of charge so it's not a barrier to anybody. So that's what we're working towards. And in the next few months, hopefully we'll have that up and running and be able to share a little bit more. But,
Well, I hope you keep me posted on that, because I think that's so important. One of the things I guess I'm gonna say it now. There's some people who, for some reason can't work for a while or whatever, and I don't charge. I just treat them, because I think it's much more important to get treatment than say, well, where's my payment? I'm not saying I'm poor by any stretch, and I'm not saying I'm rich, but I'm just saying that sometimes you got to do what's best. And having a first responder be in a position where they're feeling alone, they can't get treatment, is absolutely terrible. So I'm very appreciative of what you're going to do. So I put all this in the show notes, both your websites. We went for about an hour. I think it's I'm more than happy to say that we're probably going to do 2 episodes out of this.
okay.
And at one point, I'd love to have you back on if you
Yeah.
want to come back,
Yeah.
especially when, good luck on the trip to Ecuador. Thank
Yeah, I
you for
appreciate
doing
it.
that too. Appreciate that. And maybe you can talk about your nonprofit next time.
Mhm.
And feel free to reach out to me whenever that happens. But I wanted to thank you for your time and your openness, because this was a great interview.
Hey, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. And you're very easy to talk to. So that was
Yeah,
nice.
and thank you for what you do, 'cause
Yeah.
this is really important. So we appreciate you.
We're,
Hmm.
we're glad that there's more people like you that are sharing it from the first responder side. Because up until recently, it's felt like we just kept getting beat on and beat on. You mentioned the situation in what was it, Minnesota, Milwaukee, and I remember being down here and people calling me names, and I'm like, I have nothing to do with this.
Hmm.
And one day I actually broke down. It was obviously this was right middle of COVID or beginning of COVID, really. And I was at the grocery store. I was at our Harris Teeter. I was just getting a sub for lunch, right? I'm in uniform. I'm not talking to anybody. And this lady, there's lines everywhere, they're 6 feet back, and she grabs me. She's an employee there, walks me to the front and checks out and says, "Thank you." And I literally started crying at the time because nobody had been nice, outside. We're being called Nazis for the whole COVID thing and not letting people do anything. We're being called, racist cops for this scene that I had nothing to do with. And that was terrible. So just that one little act of kindness. So thank you, Steve, for what you do, to share that a little bit.
Thank you, and I'll never stop until, well, hopefully, for several years.
Hmm.
But thank you for what you do, and thank you for, like I said, being an officer is quite a thankless job right now, and I truly appreciate you. Being a therapist who work with first responders, finding competence, culturally competent first responder therapists is
Yeah.
extremely hard. I'm
Mhm.
working on that in a group here in Massachusetts, but that is
Mhm.
one of the hardest things to do. And if just to plug something, the Second Alarm Project out of Florida, they do work a lot with the Carolinas too. So that's another thing I would say.
You said, is that spelled out second?
Yeah, I think it's the number 2 second.
Okay.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't get any, by the way, in case anybody wonders on this podcast, I get $0 and zero cents from that. It's the Second Alarm Project. It's a great little app. And they do, if you want to do your self assessments, which is what I love the most about that app. And so that way you can know if you may need some help. Just like when I do my CIT trainings, I always do the trauma one, and I do the ACEs, the adverse
Mhm.
child events. And I say, "Oh, look at the questions." And then I pause purposefully for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And then I look at, like, "Hey guys, how many of you scored over 4 here?" And no one wants to really answer. I said, "So you didn't answer? That's highly likely the average is 7 for police." So just for the record, just wanted to mention it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the stuff you got to do to get them thinking. But I feel like I plugged too many things. I think I didn't want to take any spotlight away. So thank you again. And for those who are listening right now, looking forward to seeing you for episode 218. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, that completes episode 217. Hope you join me for episode 218 on the next episode. Thank you.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.